All right, now we're going to record. Really, I gave this class already today, but I forgot to record it. So now I'm going to record it. Here it goes. And we're talking about the last plague that God brought on the Egyptians, namely the plague of the firstborn. And immediately after that, God gives Moses the first commandment that's written in the Torah for the Jewish people, that Moses gave to the Jewish people. And that is the commandment of sanctifying the month, deciding when the new month is. And immediately after that is the commandment of taking the Paschal lamb, taking a sheep or a goat into the houses and prepare it for the going out of Egypt, slaughtering it on the night of Passover and putting the blood on the doorposts and eating it and then going out of Egypt. So that's what we're preparing for now. That's what we're talking about. All right, so let's go. Let me just make sure that I am recording. Yes, I am. Okay. So let's go back a little bit, just a little bit of Moses is still talking to Paro. He still is talking to Paro. And he's warning him. And this is before Paro says, get away from me. I never want to see you again. You're never going to see my face. Here it says, Vayomer lo Paro, lech me alai, go away from me. The Shomer, don't see my face anymore, because the day you see my face, you're going to die. Okay, so in the Torah, there's things are not written in the chronological order that they happen. So what we're going to read now is something that happened before Paro kicked Moses out, because we're going to see Moses is going to be talking to Paro. Here we go. Moses says to Paro, okay, you're not going to see my face anymore. God said to Moses, there's one more plague that I'm going to bring on Paro and on the Egyptians, and afterward, he's going to send you all out completely. He's going to, in fact, how do you say, evict you from Egypt. Up to now, he's been holding on to you, and he didn't want to let you go. He's not just going to let you go. He's going to evict you from the land of Egypt. So we did this yesterday. So speak, Moses, go and speak to, this is God speaking to Moses, go to the people and tell them that each man should take from his any Egyptian that he knows, and any woman from any Egyptian lady that she knows, vessels of silver and gold. God says, please, God is saying to Moses, please speak to the people and tell them to take silver and gold. Why? And Rashi says, because God said, I promised Abraham, like 400 years earlier, in what's called the BalHaTurim, the covenant that I made between the pieces, promised Abraham that his offspring were going to be slaves in a strange land, but they were going to go out with great riches, so that people wouldn't say the first part of the promise he kept. The Jews were slaves, and going out of riches he didn't give them. So he said, please ask the Jews to take out from Egypt. Now what do the Jews have to need the money for? God could have just given them money. What's the big problem? Right? God could have just given them all the money in the world. Everything belongs to God. So the answer is a very deep one and a very mysterious one. But it's the whole reason why God created the world. That the Jews are supposed to be in this world in order to what's called elevate the world, to reveal the godliness in the world. Revealing the godliness in the world means using everything in the world, revealing everything, the use, everything in the world, the use that everything in the world has to serve God. How everything can be used to serve God in some way. And serving God just means, making another person feel happy, to give money to charity, to do a good deed, to stop doing something bad, to hold yourself bad. That's called elevating the sparks. The Jewish people, by suffering in Egypt in slavery for 210 years, or a big part of 210 years, and still believing in God, is that elevated all of the power of Egypt to holiness. That's called raising up the sparks, Allah and Netzutzot. And it took the form of this money. So they took the money out of Egypt so that the Jews could use it for themselves and building the temple and etc. So what do they need money for in the desert? And so that's what the idea was. So taking the money. And okay, so Moses is speaking to the people that God will put favor in the Egyptians. He will put favor of the Jews in the eyes of the Egyptians, and also you should know that Moses was very great in the eyes of the Egyptians and the servants of Paro, and in also of the people. In other words, everyone liked Moses. Everyone would like the Jewish people, and the non-Jews would give them the riches. Now you have to understand that the Jewish people did not say to the Egyptians, give us money and we're leaving. No, they said, give us money and we'll be back. We just want this money for our rituals. And we're going to be back in just a couple of days. They fooled the Egyptians. Why did they fool them? Because the Jews were put into slavery through trickery. The Jews and the Egyptians had been best friends. And suddenly they came and said, listen, we have a new project. We want to build these cities. Well, you want to help? The Jews said, sure, why not? Why not help? And they said, okay, let's see how much Paro can do. Paro put a brick. He made a brick and he put it in his, says he hung it around his neck on a chain. Paro. And he said, this is what all the Jews should do every day. If the king can do it, the Jews can, and we'll pay you good. And the Jews said, okay. And they worked and they worked. They said, see how much work you can do? Very good. What about the pay? We'll talk about that later. When? 200 years from now, we'll pay you. Right? If you succeed in getting out. And now the Jews are getting out and they want the payment. They want, okay. Vayoma Moshe said to Paro, Vayoma Moshe, this is what Moshe spoke to. Now he's speaking to Paro. And this is talking about before Paro evicted him. This is talking about before the sentence that we started this class with. When Paro said, don't see me anymore. This is Rashi saying. And he says, like midnight, I am going to take the Jews. I'm going to begin taking the Jews out of Egypt. Midnight was the time when the firstborn are going to be smitten. Why did he say like midnight? Why didn't he say midnight? So Rashi explains that really God told Moses exactly at midnight, but Moses had to make a good impression on the non-Jews. One of the functions of all these 10 plagues was so that the Egyptians themselves would see that God rules over every single aspect of nature, of reality, from any view that you can look at it. God rules over it. And that's all the different plagues, as they correspond to what's called the 10 sphirot, the 10 aspects of godliness. So these 10 different aspects were the different plagues. And the reason was so that the Egyptians, even if there was only one Egyptian left, or even that one Egyptian would know about the power of the creator of the universe, about God. So the Egyptians were always looking away for not to be impressed, because that's the whole thing of Egypt. They loved nature. So therefore, if God would have said, you're going to get out exactly midnight, and they didn't know exactly how to calculate when midnight was. They thought, we got it. The Jews, the plague of the firstborn was a minute before midnight. Moses was wrong. So therefore, because God wanted to avoid this, as he said, as Moses wanted to avoid this, so Moses said, God is going to smite you alike around midnight, a little bit before, maybe a little afterwards, around midnight. That's what Rashi says. God said over here, I am going to take the Jews out. God said, I am going to take the Jews out. Says the HaChaim that why does God have to do it himself? And so he's announcing, even though she usually come on Mishartim, I have a lot of servants. God says, I got angels, I got powers, I got demons, whatever I could. I could send another nation to take the Jews out. I control everything. Nevertheless, I'm going to take the Jews out myself. Why? Because of two reasons. Number one, I love the Jews so much that I want to be the one personally to take them out. And number two, an angel can't really differentiate between the firstborn and the secondborn, right? Who comes from the first seed and who doesn't? Mihu shenotzar mitipa rishona shel adam sheyikra gam kein bechor. This is called the firstborn. Even though there might be, maybe he has a few children, but according to some opinions, that if the mailman had all the Egyptians, they were completely licentious people to the point where there's a lot of things like, for instance, that are forbidden because the Egyptians used to do it. There's a commandment: don't do what the Egyptians do. Don't do. And one of the things is, for instance, lesbianism. Lesbianism is not mentioned clearly in the Torah that's forbidden, but it's forbidden because that's what they used to do in Egypt. That was one of the, perversions that they did over there in Egypt. The decadence. So therefore, the Egyptians were very, very decadent. So one woman could have, a child from the milkman, another child from the mailman, and another child from their next door neighbor, and who knows, from her own son. And all of these would be called firstborn. Come opinions. And so therefore, the angel doesn't know which one's the firstborn, which one's not a firstborn, but God does. He knows which one is the first one and who is the first, which child is the first born child. Moses is still speaking to Paro. The firstborn, mate called Bechor Beretz Mitzrayim, all the firstborn will die. From the firstborn of Paro that's sitting in his throne, until the firstborn of the maidservant, which is she's working behind the mill grinding wheat, and also all the firstborn of the animals. Here the BalHaTurim says 3 times it says Bechor by people. Bechor, all the male firstborn, the firstborn of Paro, and the firstborn of the handmaid. And then it says also the firstborn of the animals, but that's animals. Why 3 times? It says because it's talking about 3 different types of firstborn. The firstborn to the father, the firstborn to the mother, and also the oldest one in the house. It could be the firstborn already died, or he left the home. But who's the leader of the house? That's also called the firstborn. And now what it says, the firstborn of the animals, this is just telling you that the firstborn of the animals died, not for... There will be a great scream in all the inland of Egypt, that like it has never been before, and like it there will never be again. And all the Jewish people, not only will they not be killed, but no dog will even sharpen his teeth. They won't even growl. Sharpen his teeth or show his tongue, whether a man or an animal, because you should know, and everyone that knows should know, Asher Yafle Hashem, that God is divided between the Egyptians and the Jews. So he says the reason is, the HaChaim says the reason is that it says in the Gemara in Baba Kama, that when dogs are barking or growling, that it's a sign that the angel of death is in the city. And here the angel of death was certainly in the city. I mean, it was killing all the firstborn. And nevertheless, when a Jew was around, a dog, it wouldn't growl. So you should know that the Jews shouldn't be afraid. Not any of them are going to die. Not even one man, not one person of the Jews would die. Listen, usually, naturally, people die anyway, even when there's no plague. By the Jews, nobody died. And the angel of death wasn't by the Jews, and that's why the dogs didn't bark or growl or whatever it is, move their tongue, whatever they do. And now Moses is speaking to Paro, right? And he's saying, all of your servants will come down to me. Paro, all the Egyptians are going to look they're going to search me out, and they're going to bow down to me, and they'll say, please, Moses, go, you leave, and all the people that are with you. And then afterwards said Moshe, I'm going to go out. And he left Paro with a tremendous anger. Why did he leave Paro with a tremendous anger? Because Paro said before him, I never want you to see my face again. Right? Here, what it says. Yeah, that's how we started the class off. Right. And Paro said, get away from me. Paro said to Moses, get out of here. The next time you see me, you're going to die. So Moses said, oh yeah, you still think that you're the boss, huh? And Moses went out with a tremendous anger. God spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Israel, saying like this. Don't we know that God spoke to him? He said, why does it say Aaron? Why does Aaron include it here? Because Aaron made so much, he invested his trouble and energy just like Moses did. Therefore, God gave him a special honor that he included Moses in his speech. So Aaron and Moses. Why does it say he spoke to them in the land of Egypt? He said in the land of Egypt, but not in the cities where the Jews were. The cities where the Egyptians were. Because it was filled with all sorts of idols. And because it was so full of idols, as God could not speak to, there couldn't be any sound. God couldn't announce anything there. What did God tell Moses? This month is yours, the first of months. Rosh Chodeshim, the head of the months. Rosh Hashanah, it'll be the beginning of the months of the year. What does it mean this month will be for you the month? Okay, a lot of wonderful explanations we have over here. But let's just look at here two of them. 1 second. We have okay, well, first of all, why does God tell Moses this law over here? What's it trying to tell us? I mean, it's so important. They're going out of Egypt. God has to stick this law in there. Why? So there's several explanations, and we're going to get to some of them. But one of the reasons is that this month is the month signified in the zodiac by Aries, whatever it is, the sheep, the ram, and that is the god of the Egyptians. The Egyptians worshipped this god. The Egyptians worshipped the sheep. That's the Egyptians. They worshipped the sheep. They worshipped everything, but the sheep was the main one. And this is also the first sign of the zodiac. So God says, I'm not going to transform this whole thing, their idolatry. I'm going to transform this into godliness, Judaism. You're going to take their sheep and sacrifice it. And you're going to take their month, which is the month of the sheep, and you're also going to transform it. This is going to be your first month of Judaism. So let's just the simple meaning. What does it mean, this month? So it says the Jewish people, they have to determine when the month begins. How do they determine? At the end of the month, the end of each month, there's no moon. The moon gets smaller and smaller until when it disappears, that's the end of the month. But it's the end of the month, but it's still the last days of the month. The new month has not started. There's no, how do you say, neutral days. The 1 month continues until the next month begins. So as soon as the moon goes away, you can't see it in the sky. So everybody starts looking up in the heavens. There can only be maximum, there can only be 2 days of darkness. In other words, the last month finishes. There's 1 day of darkness, and that's going to be the 29th day. And the next day, is the beginning of the next month, the 30th. Or it can be that there's going to be 2 days of darkness. And then the beginning of the next month, which means that month is going to be 30 days long. And the next month is going to start on the 31st day. So in other words, which won't be the first, that'll be the first day of the next month. So in other words, a month can either be 29 days or 30 days. If it's 29 days, then they're going to have that 1 day of darkness. That's going to be the 29th day. And they're going to see the moon, new month. Right? The moon. So the 29th day is going to be a dark day. And then all of a sudden they're going to see the moon. And that'll be, they'll know that month was 29 days. And the next month is 30. Or there can be 2 dark days. There'll be 1 day that'll be the 29th day, it'll be dark. And also the 30th day will also be dark. And then they'll see the moon. That'll be the beginning of the next month. So the Jews have to, and it can only be 2. That's the maximum. A month can only be either 29 or 30 days. There's no longer. So all the Jewish people have to look up and see when the moon is. Now, the problem is there's a lot of times where you can see something that looks like the moon, but it's really not the moon. So that's what it says. God showed Moses, Chodesh Hazeh, it says this month, and there's this moon, God showed him the moon, what it looks like. And it says when the moon looks like this, and then it'll be the next new month. And this is talking about which month? The month of Nisan. This is the month the Jewish people got out of Egypt. This will be the beginning of the months. Now, the Jewish year, the first day of the Jewish year is Rosh Hashanah. Right? That was the day that man was created. But that's the first day of the solar month, of the regular natural month. But the beginning of the month of miracles, that's the month of Nisan. So that starts the number of months. In Judaism, the months don't have names. The names were given afterwards in Babylon. In the Torah, there's no names of months. Sometimes it's called Chodesh Aviv. Right? It's called the Chodesh Aviv, right? But that means because it's the month of the spring. So that's why the Jewish calendar goes according to the moon, but it also has to be in sync with the sun. In other words, the seasons, so that Nisan always falls in the spring. How do they do that? So every 3 years they add on another month, and so that it always comes out exact. Comes out in a month. The Arab calendar goes only according to the moon. So as a result, they can have their holidays. The same holiday sometimes can fall in the winter, and sometimes it fall in the summer. The what is it? The regular the Christian calendar, whatever you want to call it, that goes only according to the sun. The beginning of the month can sometimes be when the moon is full, sometimes when the moon is empty, sometimes there's no connection whatsoever to the moon. But the Jews are both. And so therefore, in the Torah, whenever it mentions the name of a month, it counts it from Nisan. Chodesh Hasheni, Chodesh Hashlishi, Chodesh Havis. It says the Torah was given the Chodesh Hashlishi, the 3rd month, that's Sivan, etc. Ramban, Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, he lived about 100 years after the Maimonides did. Something like that. He said, this month is the first of the month. Says Ramban, this is the first commandment that God gave to the Jewish people by means of Moses. Therefore, it said in the land of Egypt, because all the other commandments were given in Mount Sinai. Or maybe it's coming to say that he gave this commandment in the land of Egypt, but not the city of Egypt. That's what Rashi already said. Here, this is the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar is Rabbi Shlomo, Ephraim Shlomo Milunchitz. He lived in the same time as the Maharal Prague. He was a bit younger. He took over the leadership of the city, of the Jewish city, the Jews in Prague, after the Maharal Prague passed away. And he said this whole idea. Why do you have to Kodesh HaChodesh? Is because, and why do you have to have the Paschal lamb sacrifice after that? And he just said all the ideas that I just gave you. Those ideas that I gave you, he said that the mazel is the teleh, the sheep. They worship the sheep, and this month was that's why they sacrificed it. Okay, so he tells them the first commandment to sanctify the months. And by the way, the months are not sanctified by just ordinary people. Ordinary people witness it, and then they have to run to the Sanhedrin. They ran to the grand court, and the grand court then interrogates them to see if they really saw the moon, because there used to be people that would lie purposely. There were groups of the Tzedukim and the Betusim, and they would try to wreck up this whole system, that the Jewish people would celebrate. So the Jewish people would celebrate Passover in the wrong time or whatever. So they would send. So they had to question the witnesses, but the court, they were the ones that decided when the month is. Something like 200-300 years after the destruction of the second temple, there was a ran called Hillel, not Hillel the elder, and he and the rabbis set a calendar for all time, and that's what we go according to now. That's how the calendar is. So all the months, they're all set. We don't go according to the moon anymore. When Mashiach builds the third temple, we'll sanctify again according to the moon. Okay, next, after we finish talking about this commandment of sanctifying the month, God says to Moses, Israel, speak to the Jewish people and say that on the 10th day of the month, right, this way he spoke to you, that was the first day of the month. On the 10th day of the month of Nisan, everyone should take a sheep to their house of their fathers. In other words, one household, Selabayit, one sheep to every home. We're going to do some of the explanation tomorrow. I just want to go over the sentence quickly, and tomorrow, God willing, we'll start from here. And if there are too few people in the house to devour a sheep, then you can take your next door neighbor, your family, or other friends, and they can gather a group of people, and so that everyone will have enough to eat from the lamb. But on the other hand, there won't be anything thrown away, or at least a minimum thrown away. A pure, unblemished sheep you should take. C is called a sheep, but it's also, we'll see, sheep. 1 year old should be from the sheep or from the goats. You can take it. And it will be, you should keep it. Watch over this. This is only when they left Egypt did they do this. In the ensuing years, well, actually when they got into the land of because all the time they were in the desert, they didn't make the Pesach offering. When they got into the land of Israel, they began to do the sacrifice again, but they didn't take it on the 10th day. This thing of watching over it, it was only done in Egypt. Only the first time when they left did they take the sheep or the goat into their house and watch over it for 4 days. They should watch over it from the 10th day. It says you should take it the 10th day of the month. You should take it, right? 10th day, where does it say the 10th day here? The Esel Chodesh, on the 10th day of the month, you take it into your house. You keep this smelly, noisy sheep in your house for 4 days. The Chodesh is there, and then you should slaughter it in the nighttime, Bein Arbaim. In other words, you slaughter it going on the 14th day before nightfall. That's what Bein Arbaim means. Bein Arbaim means after noon. What are you supposed to do with it? Then you take the blood and you put it on the 2 doorposts and on the overhang of your houses that you will eat in them. And Rashi will explain later that he has to put the blood inside, on the inside of the door, not on the outside. And then you'll eat this meat on that night, roasted with fire and with matzot and bitter herbs. You eat this Paschal lamb. Don't eat it slightly boiled, or I'm sorry, slightly roasted. It has to be totally roasted. No, it means like, rare. Or don't boil it in water. It has to be roasted on the fire with its head on its knees over its stomach. And we'll talk about what that is. And don't leave any over until the morning. And if you do, then you have to burn it. Okay, now this putting of the blood, we're gonna go over this tomorrow. We'll stop here. This putting of the blood, this is only when they left Egypt. After that, they never did it again. They never put blood on their doorposts afterwards. So this was now why did they take it into the house and leave it there for 4 days? It says in order to enhance, to actually create bravery, courage. The Egyptians still were the leaders. It was their country. And the Jews were strangers. They had been slaves. Therefore, the Jews, they had been slaves, and their parents were slaves, and their grandparents were slaves. 4 generations, basically, of slaves. So Jews had slave mentality, and they were afraid of the Egyptians. Now what God is telling them to do, take a sheep into your house, and it's going to be bleating and making noise. And this sheep is the god of the Egyptians. And the Egyptians are going to ask the Jews, what are you doing? Are you embracing our religion? They'll say, oh, no, exactly the opposite. We're going to slaughter this to the God that's been making you all this trouble. We're slaughtering the God. And we're leaving Egypt. So they figured, listen, maybe there's going to be some Egyptian that's going to say, listen, I've had enough of you guys. You're making trouble for us. Now you're trying to mess with our God, our Lord. So you figure the Jews would be at least a little bit apprehensive, a little bit scared. So God said, don't worry. Take it into your house. You'll see that if you're not afraid, nothing is going to happen wrong. And so it was. So it enhanced the self-confidence of the Jewish people, knowing that if they're really connected to God, that they can kill the false gods of the non-Jews, which is going to benefit everybody anyway. And in some way, the non-Jews realized this. That was the purpose of taking and in fact, even more, it says that the firstborn asked the Jews, everyone was asking the Jews, what are you doing with this sheep in your house? And the Jews said, oh, we're going to kill it in a few days, and God's going to kill all the firstborn of the Egyptians. All the firstborn Egyptians, instead of getting mad at the Jews, they got mad at Paro. They attacked Paro's palace, and they said, let the Jews go. We're all going to die. And Paro said, what are you angry about? We said, well, we're firstborn. They're going to kill the firstborn. And Paro said, I'm not going to let them out. So there was a war. The firstborn made a war against Paro. Seems that Paro was victorious, but that's what it says, that God smote. We say there's a song we saying, Kilo Olam Chazdo. It's part of the Psalms. The Psalms of King David. It's with the Hallel Agadol that we say in the evening. We say it on Shabbat also. Kilo, that God's greatness is eternal. God's greatness is to the world. Kilo Olam Chazdo. And one of the things we say, that God smote Egypt in their firstborn. So usually the simple meaning is that God smote the firstborn of Egypt. And here we're saying, no, it's a little bit different meaning, that God smote Egypt with their firstborn. The firstborn, they were the ones that did the smiting. The firstborn, they were the ones that got all angry, and they made a war against Paro. The firstborn Egyptians, the pride and the power of Egypt, fought against the Jews. Fought on the side of the Jews. They fought against the Egyptians. I'm sorry. They fought together with the Jews against the Egyptians. They took the Jewish side. They fought against the Egyptians. So that was the big miracle, which was incurred because of them taking this sheep into their house for 4 days. And that's why it's not done in the ensuing generations, because we don't have to show that bravery, because there's no one to show it to. Right? We're not in the Egyptian anymore. Have a good day with Mashiach. Now, God willing, 8:15 tomorrow morning, we will learn Chassidut. Hope to see you.